Hello, my name is Nicole Mela. I'm the Deputy Online Editor at MaltaToday, and today we're going to continue on the budget topic with an interview with economist JP Fabri.
Hi.
Nice to see you again, because we had
Pleasure.
done this a year ago
A
as
year
well.
ago, yes.
I mean, first off, maybe first comments on your opinion on the budget so far.
Yeah, I mean, the budget is, as I described it, social to the core, right? So it's aimed at increasing or enhancing disposable income of people. It looks at a mix of tax cuts, increases in social benefits, pensions, and those measures. But if we had to weigh it against measures taken which really focus on the productive capacity of the economy, I must say that it is lacking, right? So it's a stimulus for the short run, but I think the investment capacity into the infrastructure of the country from a productive point of view is lacking.
Mm-hmm. And indeed, even the finance minister himself, in the interview we had with him last week, he insisted very heavily on the need to improve our productive capacity in Malta. In that perspective, what sort of measures should we have seen in the budget to sort of improve productivity?
So let me sort of give a bit of an overview of where we're at from an economic point of view. So if I had to look at the headline figures, Malta performs extremely well. Actually outperforms the European average by a lot. We have the lowest unemployment rates as well. So our performance on headline figures is very good. But then when you look into the numbers and you decompose the growth is coming very much from demand-driven growth, consumption-based growth. Now, what we would like to see as economists at the end of the day is that growth is very much export-led, right? Because you're creating much more real value within the economy. Now, from an export perspective, we're doing well because the numbers are growing as well. So if you see tourism, for example, but then tourism, we're seeing a huge increase in numbers, but it is not necessarily the profile of the tourists that one would want, because we're always basing ourselves on high numbers. Now that constitutes an economic cost to the country, a strain on the infrastructure, strain on congestion, strain on development, and also an increased requirement on human resources. Why? Because the hospitality industry is very human resource centric and dependent, as opposed to high value manufacturing, whereby you might have less workers that earn much more because the skills needed are of a higher value, but then through the use of high technology manufacturing, you're being more productive. So in reality, what Malta faces is a productivity crisis from my perspective, right? So and the only way that Malta can attain quality or high value economic growth is to ensure that the Maltese workforce, now not only intrinsically Maltese, right, but workers in Malta continue earning more. So we need to aspire to have higher wages. And the only way that is possible is through more quality. Now, quality can sound like a cliche, but you want jobs that pay more. And that can only be done with higher skill-based jobs. And that means the whole pipeline. So you need more education, better skills, and then you have a better pipeline to get the industries that will employ those. So I would say from an economic point of view, we're pretty much at a crossroads in the sense, where do we want this country to go? And I think Vision 2050, which was announced, is a very good, needed initiative in this regard. And I think what the country really needs is aspirational. So we need to start dreaming again, in the sense, where do we want the country to go from an economic point of view, from a social point of view, from an educational point of view. And I hope that the Vision 2050 will be less of economic studies, but more of a thought process and of a systems process. So, because everything is interconnected, right? Today's economy is a network of things. So I would say that the debate needs to be centered exactly where do we see ourselves in 50 years, but from a complete holistic point of view. And hopefully we can also have the courage, because ultimately a journey of building a vision is about courage, right? And it's about the ability to take decisions which challenge the status quo. And I would like to see the country able to challenge status quo in a number of areas. Education, the first. Health. We're still focused too much on care rather than prevention. Education, we're still fixated on exams from a very young age, as opposed to creativity, innovation, STEM subjects and all of that. So hopefully this process is about probing, is about dreaming, and is about challenging, which I think the budget did not really cater for that, right? So now, truth be told, the budget is not the be-all and end-all, right? So the government in a year publishes a number of visions, strategies, initiatives, policies. But I think there needs to be more of a unifying thread between all the different things happening. And that is where hopefully the vision will give us that northern star where the country is heading to.
And you mentioned this, in fact, that sort of we're at this crossroads. Like, we are at an important juncture, economically, also socially, I would say. And you said that maybe the budget might not have been enough. What would you have expected from a budget that would have tackled maybe this particular issue? As you're saying, the budget is not the be-all, end-all.
Correct. I mean, the government in an economy performs a number of roles, right? So you have a stabilizing role. So, for example, when an external threat or an internal threat shock hits the economy, then the government intervenes to stabilize and reduce that shock. And we saw it in COVID, we saw it with the electricity hike, where government intervened, subsidized, and kept the prices stable, for example, for energy. Then it has an allocation role, right? So how does it allocate its resources? So if we had to look at this budget, the way government allocated its resources were much more tipping towards the short-term demand-driven initiatives rather than the longer-term base to improve our structural productive capacity. So I would have liked, for example, to see more support to industry, but conditional support, right? So industry invests more in productive lines, digitalization, transition to the green energy, and then government helps more, right? So I think aid needs to be much more conditional, as opposed to a subsidy, which is a blanket rate, and you're not incentivized. I think as well, from an economic point of view, we have unfortunately been victims of the political game, the electoral game, in the sense that today tax is seen as the gruffalo in the room, you know. So when in reality tax can be an important nudge to change behavior and ultimately to address significant challenges that the country is facing. So if we're talking about traffic, right, at the end of the day, there's so much one can do. If new cars continue entering the traffic system, our space is limited. It's what it is. This is like a water sink. If you close the tap, I mean, it will overflow. It's the same with traffic. So one of the nudges needs to be, you either make having a car expensive, and that will start, or you start incentivizing a number of other elements, So I think tax can't be seen as the bad boy in the room. There are times when tax is needed to incentivize behavior, because economics is all about nudging human behavior. So you wanted to either shift it into positive traits, changes, green energy, digitalization, education, health prevention, or else you reduce the negative elements, cigarettes, these sort of things. So tax has an important element. So I think even in this vision, hopefully, politicians from both sides can stand up and say, yes, this behavior needs to be taxed. Because ultimately it will improve the quality of life.
Do you think politically it is something that the parties could get on board with, or do you think
I think this is going to be critical for division, right? And I think we need to start being a bit more mature in our discussions, because the electoral political game has had huge ramifications on the Maltese governance system, economic system, and then this percolates throughout, right? So, one, it is time to discuss pay, salaries of ministers, right? You can't get the right talent. Ultimately, a minister is a CEO of an organization that employs thousands of people, accounts for huge percentages of GDP. So it doesn't make sense that then you have, for example, CEOs under the minister earning much more than the minister. And even there, I think both parties need to sit down and have this discussion and agree that then, come the election, no one will stay saying, I will reduce this and I will do this. It's a bipartisan agreement. There's an agreement when the new salary packages will come in, and that's it. Because otherwise we're going to continue in this game of mediocrity and ping-ponging on things, So hopefully this vision can really, 2050 is good. There are multiple elections away. So if we can agree, both parties coming together, social partners come together, and I would say carve an economic pact, a social pact, whereby everyone agrees, then hopefully we can start challenging the status quo.
To remain on the subject of, Vision Malta 2050, for example, in the budget day also, the finance minister also mentioned the transport master plan, for example, a new policy, an economic migration policy. But having said that, going back to the fact that we're in this important juncture, these strategies, these documents, these master plans, how they are important, but shouldn't this have been a discussion that took place maybe a year ago, 2 years ago,
yes.
Maybe during COVID?
Yes. I think COVID could have been the perfect time for a proper national vision. In fact, a number of countries use that time to do that, right? Because it's like the pit stop in Formula One. Everyone stopped, and then it's a question that you can rethink and redefine who you are and what you aspire to be. And I think this is what what needs to be done. So we need to sit down and look at our aspirations as a nation state in a changing global economic order, in a changing technological dimension, in a changing energy dimension. So we need to sit down, and I always say, I think we lost our interaction with dreams as a country. So I think we really need to dream ahead and see where we aspire to. And hopefully, from there, take a systems approach. Because on Malta, we have the tendency to be extremely fragmented and siloed, right? And I think there needs to now be a proper foundational element, priority element, building, right? Building blocks. I mean, building a vision, building an economy is playing with Lego at the end of the day. So they're all bricks coming together, brick at a time. And this is what I hope that this whole process will entail. And as you said, yes, there is a traffic management, but that needs to be seen in the whole experience. What do we aspire from tourism? What numbers are we looking at? What is the stress on that? What is our planning policy? Are we going to remain with the same OBZs? Are we going to expand our footprint from a transport perspective? You know, what's that? What's the health data telling us about asthma, about other pollution related, you know? Are we going to EVs? Then if EVs, do I have the capacity for fast charging networks whereby you can stop and charge your car in 10 minutes as it happens abroad? Or are we stuck with chargers that take a couple of hours, right? So this is all a network. This is all a system that comes together. And hopefully we start tackling things in this comprehensive manner.
And I guess the next question would be, at what point do you move from planning to action, in a sense? And is it something that can be done at the same time, necessarily? Because I think politically, people are expecting action to be taken in certain areas.
Correct.
So
no,
maybe
I think
it's not the time for, as in the time for planning should have been yesterday, not today.
yes, but and then if we always...
no, it doesn't mean that you don't start
planning. It never
planning,
happens, you know? So I think there needs to be a contained period of huge discussion, aspirational discussion, right? Setting the targets where we want to be. And then literally, as you're saying, planning and taking action. So now it's all about, at the end of the day, getting things done. And that is where, and then I think the civil service also will need to up its game. So ultimately a vision is not about a nice document, conferences, and all, right? It's all about project management. It's going to be all about getting all hands on deck, KPIs which are open, transparent, and people can see the progress towards milestones, right? So government, for example, mentioned that there are going to be an interim period of milestones, 2035, I believe. So even there, in the run-up, we now need open data, open government to see exactly where we're heading. And this also leads me to another point, which is unfortunately lacking in the whole policy sphere, which is results-based budgeting, right? So this has been implemented in a number of countries, Estonia and all of that, whereby government policies are then scrutinized with impact assessments, right? So we spend loads on education, but then in the outcomes, we're not getting the value of that investment in the outcomes, right? Educational attainment is low, school leaving rates are high. Malta scores poorly in the PISA standings when it comes to STEM as well. So there's a disconnect. We're throwing money, but the result for the country is suboptimal. So we need to have this evidence-based policy impact assessments, which then percolates into the budget, which is results-based, right? So hopefully the cycle of policy making becomes much more feedback-driven and impact-driven. So, as I said, we really need to challenge the status quo because we've been doing things too much for the sake of they've always been done this way.
How do you think, because you mentioned the disconnect, and it's true, like sometimes what happens is that the government throws money in certain sectors, but then the outcomes aren't what we would have expected them to be. How does that happen maybe in the first place? Because you would think that, you know, investment means outcome, but it's not the case. Maybe just to explain it a bit.
I think it's a whole, it's the cracks in the system, right? So possible lack of resources, lack of skilled resources, lack of infrastructure. We still maybe, if we're talking about education, which is still focused on exams, competitive exams. Whereas if you see what happens in the Nordic countries, till 7, till 8, they don't even have an exam. They're still learning music, drama, creativity, design. And then you look at their outcome-based indicators and they perform much better than Malta. So is our college educational system right? So these are the questions, because ultimately results, if you look at education is a path, it's a journey, right? It's not a switch on and off. It happens over the course of years. And the educational outcomes depend not only on what you're throwing in the formal educational system, but what's happening outside in the informal, in families, in the broader community. So it can be that we are not having a good enough early intervention system whereby children, because they were born in vulnerable families, they're doomed for life. You know, so I think that is why I continue harping on evidence-based, because it can be that we really need to improve early intervention. The same with healthcare, right? We've been saying that we're the most obese population. Children are the most obese. We have metabolic health deficiencies, diabetes, cholesterol, you know, but still, there is no nutrition education in our schools. There's no healthy eating campaigns as a population. Yes, now there has been initiative to get youths into gyms, but our schools, do they prepare them for physical activity? And in reality, we know that health outcomes, 80% is nutrition, 20% physical activity. What are we doing? Is it time to tax junk food like other countries are doing? Is it time to label ultra-processed food in supermarkets like other countries are doing? When we look at our diets, most probably our calorie intake is 80% ultra-processed. How are we helping? And this is where the systems come. So what is our vision for agriculture, for food security, for food sovereignty? What are we doing to improve the access to real whole foods in our schools, in our families? So we need to challenge, we need to question, and where needed, we need to really change things. It's about a subtle revolution at the end of the day, you know. So Malta today, it's not a pun on the name, but Malta today is not the Malta we want tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And we need to define what is the Malta we want tomorrow for ourselves, for our kids, for the kids of our kids.
So to remain a bit on sort of the idea of sustainability, maybe I want to touch a bit on pension sustainability, because pensions came up in this budget quite a bit. Obviously, there was that increase in the amount of social security payments one must make to earn to receive a full pension at
Correct.
retirement age. The government also introduced this sort of matching scheme. It's in the public sector, so that the government can step in and match the workers' pension contributions, essentially. Overall, do you think this is enough to ensure pension sustainability in the longer term?
So, pensions has a history, right? So it back in the years, I would say most probably 15, 20 years ago, the pension time bomb started being high on the policy agenda, not only in Malta, but in Europe, right? And the reality is we have an aging population, fertility levels are low, and as a pay-as-you-go system, ultimately the pot that people will expect to find will dwindle. Now, what happened over the past 10 years is that we have been saved to a certain extent. So, or the time bomb has sort of been diffused a bit. And the reason is that the increase in foreign workers in Malta meant that social security has increased much more than pensions being paid out, right? So we managed to fill up our piggy bank a bit more. But that would be a very myopic, temporary way of seeing it, right? So we're interested in long-term sustainability. And there's another, it's a case in point of doing things not the right structural way. We've known the solutions. We're not reinventing the pension system. The solutions are there. 3 pillars, right? So you need a state, you need another pillar whereby there's a matching, and then you have the third pillar, which is the private pension scheme. But we have been slow in implementing that. And the reason is, there are multiple reasons, but one of them is because if you're saving more today, your disposable income today will go down, right? So even here, tax positive incentives need to be in place to nudge behavior, because it's not only enough to have a pension, but we need to think about the affordability of pensions in the future, right? So it's not about guaranteeing a pension, it's about making sure that the standard of living of people who reach pensionable age can remain, right? You don't want to start having a poverty crisis at pensionable age. So this is where, as well, hopefully the vision, we are late, right? But we've been given a bit of a breather with the impact of TCMs on the pensions. But hopefully everyone can come together, political parties, unions, employers, and literally say, these are the new way we're going to structure a pension. And these are the incentives, this is what needs to be done from employers, from employees, because ultimately we're safeguarding your future retirement as well. So these are the serious discussions, facts and hopefully, we can challenge, not for any political mileage, but because everyone is cognizant and recognizes the need to take corrective action and to get things done right.
You had also mentioned during the budget, during our live commentary that we had on our website, that you would like to hear measures that improve the social fabric and that go beyond allowances and social welfare. What sort of measures would you have liked to see in this regard, and do you think the budget stepped up to that expectation?
Yeah, social when you're allocating resources or redistributing resources, there are two ways. You either give handouts, increase in allowances, or else you build an institutional framework, a community-based framework that looks at intervention, prevention, be it social, health, education. And over there, I still think that we're lacking in this regard, you know. So I think we still have people being left on the sidelines. We can look at various soft indicators, homelessness, even if you speak to a number of NGOs, food banks, soup kitchens. I mean, if it weren't for these NGOs, and here the church plays an important role as well, then we would have bigger issues out there. So I think we need to rediscover the value of community-based care, and the same in healthcare, right? So today we have one acute hospital that does not have the capacity to cater for the increased population that we have. So the only way is we either open a number of smaller hubs to distribute the load, or else we rediscover community care, which in other countries, even in Europe, has seen an emergence and an increase. And today, with the use of digital infrastructure, is something that can be done relatively easy. But even here, I think we need to up our game, even when we're talking about digital services. In reality, we're not digital to the core. Digital is not about filling a form online. Digital is about having the processes behind the user interface that really leverage the productivity enhancements that technology can bring. It's about having your prescriptions online. It's about having everything in a government app which allows you to open a bank account in 5 minutes. Now, the budget mentions that the process to start this is going to start. But there again, we could have done it earlier. We're small, and this agility is something that if we lose that, we lose our competitive edge, right? So, and this applies to all spheres. Today, capital is extremely mobile. Companies shift around. So we need to continuously reinvent ourselves. And it is not about, because even this, it becomes a cliche, a new economic model, new economic sectors. There's a limit to how much new we can do. It's about ensuring that we're ahead of the curve with the sectors that we have. Because you don't want to dismantle something that worked. What you want to do is increase the scope of that current sector, attract ancillary services. So we're already doing it, and we've done it successfully in the past. Financial services, we've moved into asset registration, maritime, ship, super yachts, aircraft, and we're leaders, you know. Gaming, what started in online gaming. Today we're seeing virtual reality games, game design, esports, and there were initiatives in this regard that were facilitating visa for these players, you know. So that is the newness that we want. We don't want to always chase a number of rabbits and then catch none. We have a very good base here. What we need to do is that base, reinvent it, make sure that it remains relevant, not for today, but for tomorrow. So that is hopefully where we need to see, and where I think we should have done more. The budget could have done more in that regard. So hopefully Now everyone is expecting that this vision is going to be the be all and end all. So, but hopefully we can have this northern star of the country where we want to get to.
All right. Maybe before we close, are there any other comments that you want to make about the budget, what you like, what you don't like, anything of the sort?
I mean, not really. As I said, it has been unapologetically social. It came out really strong. But I think it fell short of addressing some key economic challenges. And one of the main ones is a productivity challenge. And for Malta to sustain a sustained, improved quality of life, it depends on enhancing our productivity, because quality of life depends not only but on getting higher wages and then making sure that there is an enabling environment to enjoy that wealth. So we also need to look at the broader element of quality of life. So it is heritage, culture, education, health prevention, environment, right? And these are all the soft characteristics which will ultimately continue enhancing Malta's attractiveness to foreign investors, to good tourists that don't necessarily spend a lot of time here, but spend more per capita. So this is the leap that one would like to see. It's not about quantity, but it's about making sure that we have the carrying capacity as a country, from an institutional, from a social, from an economic, from an environmental point of view, to literally build a standard of living that is sustainable and ultimately leads to what the Greek philosophers used to always say, the good life.
JP, thank you very much for this interview and for your analysis on the budget. Thank you for following this interview with us. You can watch this interview as well as all our other interviews on the MaltaToday website, as well as on our Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Spotify. Thank you very much.